Can everybody hear me? We're good?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name is Chris. I'm the Managing Director for Hearsay Social for EMEA. I'm excited to be with you. And I was looking forward to being here because I was at a similar event when I first moved to London about 2.5 years ago at a conference in Madrid. And at that time, we had no customers in Madrid. There was no one in Spain really beginning to digitalize their agents or help them in these new channels. And what gives me hope being here 2.5 years later is today we work with 5 of the multinational insurance players in Spain, bringing their agents into hopefully the modern world, helping them do what they do best, right? Your agents are there to build relationships, connect with customers, service people, build new prospecting opportunities. And I'm encouraged by what's happened in the last 2.5 years and excited to see what we can build on together from here. So I'm always a little nervous as the social media guy at the innovation event. You're looking for practical tips, right? I don't have any magic here. There's no magic in social media. It's hard work. It requires a program. It requires discipline at the corporate level, at the agent level. So my goal today is to give you some practical steps that whether you use software or you do it manually, you can kind of help your channels become more digital, help your agents into the modern world. So that's what my focus will be today. A little background on our company. We started the organization 6 years ago in San Francisco. We've raised $51 million in funding over that period. And today we have around 130,000 users of our platform. And a user of Hearsay Social would be the insurance agent. So it's a wealth manager, an insurance agent, be it independent or captive. That's our target customer. We're helping them build relationships in these new digital channels. We expanded into Europe about 2.5 years ago. Today we have 35 financial organizations using our platform across Europe. We'll touch on some of those topics in the presentation today, but that's a little bit of background on our organization. We only sell to financial services organizations. So these are a few logos of companies we work with. There's about 140 different financial firms we work with today. And again, we only work in financial services, and the only customer within financial services we're really focused on serving is that individual salesperson. How are we helping them go online, stay relevant, and do what they do best, which is build relationships. And we'll talk about some of those practical tips today. So I've heard a lot of these kind of new buzz companies thrown around up here in terms of, Airbnb is disrupting this, and Uber makes our life easier, and how is the insurance industry going to take advantage of these new trends, right? It's cloud, it's big data, it's software as a service, it's the direct channels. What is the insurance industry actually going to do to better serve their customer? And I had one really practical story that I heard recently and wanted to share with you from a new US-based insurance company. Maybe show of hands, who's heard of a new insurance company in the US called Metro Mile? Anyone? We've got just a couple of people, 2 or 3. So Metro Mile is a new insurance company based out of San Francisco that is serving a market with a new concept of pay-as-you-go insurance. So the idea is don't pay your premiums up front, don't pay monthly, pay us based on how much you drive. So they're targeting auto insurance first, and they're saying, in a big city, it doesn't make sense for you to pay the same amount every month when your risk actually varies based on how frequently you are driving. So kind of an interesting model. A lot of people are switching, there's cost savings. But the story of what they've done most effectively is how they're delighting their customers. And this one story I wanted to share was one of the best examples of the use of big data. And I think often we think of big data in terms of social. There's so much data out there. We have so much data on our customers. But the customer is probably wondering, why do you spend so much time thinking about big data and I don't feel the results of it? Right? I think this is our challenge. And this company, Metro Mile, did something really interesting in San Francisco. So I was a car owner in San Francisco for 2 years. This shows how responsible I am. I think I spent about $3,000 to $4,000 in those 2 years on fines and fees and getting the vehicle towed. I'm not going to do a breakdown of my wife's costs versus my costs, but we spent collectively $3,000 to $4,000 to the city of San Francisco on these fees. And it was everything from you're parked in the wrong area to the street cleaning changed. So what Metromile did to delight their customers was, they have this device in the vehicle that's aware of how frequently you're using the car and how far you're going. It's also aware of where the car is parked. And so what they started doing was texting their customers to say, warning, this has nothing to do with your insurance, but tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., you're in a tow zone. The estimated fee is $500 to tow the vehicle. San Francisco doesn't tell you they tow the vehicle. They charge you $100 a day until you figure it out. Would you like to move your car? So talk about a delightful way to take advantage of big data in insurance that has really very little to do about the actual product you're servicing, but it's clever ways to use this data. And I think often we get confused in the industry around all this information we have, but practical ways we can apply it. And I just want you to think about that in terms of how we might do that as a company. So applying these 5 big trends, the core one I'm going to focus on today is social. That's been our first product as a company around how we enable the advisor and agent on social media. But the others are obviously categories you've heard a lot about today, and you're thinking about how you apply in your organization. So I think one of the most important numbers I've seen recently is that 70% of the world will be on social by 2017. This is all markets. This isn't something that you're going to wait it out and skip this trend and get on the next one. That was often the conversation we'd have of you need to make your organization digital, and the organization would say, well, maybe it's not social, maybe it's the next one. And I would say, whether it's social or not, it takes time to transform how an organization thinks. And if you can help your agents and your team think in terms of social, you'll be better prepared for the next trend, and also social is here to stay. I think the piece of this that is most interesting to me is with that amount of people moving online and the amount of time they're spending on these networks. I think it was just 2 months ago, Facebook released data that they had 1 billion people log in that day. Usually when people are talking about activity rates, they're looking at a year and saying, oh, we had 30% activity in the year for our product. Facebook has 1 billion people logging in a day. And I think the way we need to think about this is there's not more time being added to the day, right? The question is, where are people spending less time now that they're spending a lot of time on social? And is your message going to the channel where your customer and prospect is engaging? And does the content fit the channel, right? The white papers or the materials you might have sent to a physical office or mailed in the post office, those might not be relevant for where the attention is being spent. And with that much of the world on these networks spending that much time every day, your question should be, what is our strategy around new content to address the new channel? And I think when you're thinking through those themes, you want to think about what the customer is expecting. So I think the first thing is that your prospects are now empowered with this information before they come to your channel, before they talk to your agent, before they go to your direct website. They've done their research, whether that's through a friend or a colleague, or through an industry website, or through your corporate site, or through the social page of a separate competitor. They're going somewhere to educate themselves before they make their purchase decision. Their expectations are really high because they're saying, you know what, because of this big data trend, you're actually in trouble. They expect more from you. They say, this data is out there. You should know more about my demographic. You should know more about what's happening in my life if I'm volunteering that information to your agent. How do you make sure that you are targeting your product and your service so you're not wasting my time? And the other is that the old techniques aren't working. And I think this is something we need to be careful about. You definitely have agents that are not going to become digitally savvy. Right? I've been in this industry now for 5 years. I know a fraction of what this audience knows, but one thing I've learned is that you don't get 100% adoption of corporate programs. You have agents that are already successful, that have already created a model where they can make their money, and they don't need to change. The question is the next generation of your salespeople and your channels. What are you doing to prepare them for the reality that it's not just face-to-face anymore? It's face-to-face plus text, plus a local website, plus social, plus email, and still make it not overwhelming for them. And I think that's the ultimate challenge that we're facing. This was a recent LinkedIn study that was done globally, looking at how decision process is made before an individual engages with sales. And I think this slide really says it all in terms of they're going to your channel to make the final purchase, but the entire education process is happening outside of your control, right? So if you're still sending things in the mail or running radio advertisements and the person is on their mobile device 3 hours a day, they're watching less TV, they're listening to less radio, maybe they're talking even less in person with your friends, and we can argue whether that's good or not, but how do we make sure that your message is getting to them before they get to that purchase decision? I think the second theme is really the idea that when information is available, how are you helping your agents capitalize on that information in an appropriate way? And as I go around and work with different insurance agents locally, we like to do what we call follow me homes, where we'll actually go into the office and see how an agent sells, see how they use the software, see how they run their business day to day, and the strategies of the way they acquire data is always really interesting, right? It's everything from working with a local funeral home to understand who has passed away so that they can be sensitive to their customer base if it's someone in their family, right? To working with the local town hall or hiring someone to read all the newspapers about the engagements and the weddings and the new babies being born. And then they operationalize this, right? They take this information at the local level and they say, let me put this into a process where I can reach out. And the question is, if this information is now being broadcast in new channels, if someone is posting a picture of their baby on Facebook, or changing their job title on LinkedIn, or changing their location on Twitter, how do you empower your agents to collect that information and teach them the best ways to respond? And I think this number from a LIMRA study in the US is showing that the knowledge of those life events, when the agent or the salesperson is aware, they are empowered to sell. They're empowered to have that conversation, and you need to teach them how to do that online the way they do it offline. You don't walk into a church or a local pub or restaurant and say, I heard you had a child, you should buy life insurance. That's not the first conversation when you meet someone. You introduce yourself, you talk about joint passions, you talk about what you care about, and eventually as that trust builds, you're able to provide them with information during that emotional time. And I think that's the challenge on social, is taking the offline best practices your local teams understand and bringing those online. We'll skip this one. The ultimate question that we have as an organization, and I think many people in the room are asking, is, will the insurance agent survive? Right? The travel agent, I remember as a child, my father booking holiday trips for us. Once a year, we would typically go to Florida or the Southwest in the US, and he'd call his travel agent, he'd book the whole program, he'd know what hotels we were going to. He just didn't have access to do this himself. And now, very few of us use travel agents. I safely made it here without calling anyone, right? I went to Google Flights, I booked my flights. I went to hotels.com, I had reviews on what was the best, source for the hotel and how to be local. How do we make sure that the insurance agent, as they are realizing these new challenges of the information is out there, how do they stay relevant? What is the way that you're going to supercharge them to kind of make them more empowered to scale what they do best, which is build relationships and build trust? And that's the question that we're working through with our clients, and hopefully you're thinking about as you look at that channel. And I think this always brings up that awkward question of the agents are looking at you as potentially the evil ones. They're like, you're building these direct channels, you're competing against us, why are we not on the same team? And I somewhat agree with them, but I think the question is, if they can't bring enough value, they won't be relevant, right? If they don't bring additional things to the table, there won't be a place for them. And the question is, how are you empowering them to do their job? How do you give them the content to have the right conversation? How do you give them the presence to do that in the right place? And I think the reality of the way they sell today has changed a lot. When I helped start this company, I think my view was maybe they'll just sell on social, right? This was my naive Silicon Valley view 6 years ago, helping to start this company. We're going to build something so great that they'll just use social media to sell as an agent. And I very quickly realized, as there was many smarter people than me and dealing with the reality of rollouts and working with thousands of agents in the field, there are many different pieces to a sales cycle. Right? There are many different pieces to how they acquire information and build a relationship. But if you start to leave out these pieces, you start to really risk that customer. You start to see churn. You start to see a failure to cross-sell. You start to see a failure to build trust. And I think if you were to take a picture of this chart and think about where your average customer spends their most time, and then compare that to where your content strategy is dedicating time, you might start to question, are the channels lining up? If we spend 90% of our resources on telephone training and in-person events, and we're spending nothing on empowering agents with local email or a mobile SMS tool to compliantly engage with their market, are we doing the right thing to keep that channel relevant, or are we gonna see them lose? That's the question I think we have. So every software company has a view of what we want the world to be. So this is kind of ours. What you see is this idea of kind of a customer journey. Starting early in the morning, the agent wakes up and there's a notification that someone that they know has had a child, right? That first signal that something important is happening in the network of someone that I care about, either a customer or a prospect or maybe a friend of a friend. That individual is then on the agent website downloading a white paper. So your second signal should be going off. Okay, they've had a child, maybe they're downloading a white paper on how to plan for a family or how to protect a family with life insurance. The agent then logs into a solution and sees, okay, these two signals mean this is someone I should reach out to today. And the question then becomes how you do that. Does the agent know that next step? It might be an in-person visit. It might be a text message. It might be an email. It might be a private message on Facebook. But aligning those channels to give them signals and to help them connect that big data into one place is really part of the challenge that we're trying to solve as a company. And if I think about 4 practical steps to kind of leave you with, regardless of whether you use software or you don't, I think these are the 4 categories that we should be thinking about in terms of social and really in terms of digital broadly for your sales force, right? Whether that's a B2B sales force dealing with independent agents or captive agents, or it's the agents dealing with their consumer, the first step should always be just to be findable. How do we make sure that your agent can get discovered? The number of stories we hear of, we can't find the agent website, we called the agent's phone number, and it's been disconnected for 3 years. And the agent's saying, I don't know how to change my phone number on my website. Right? These are just simple problems of getting discovered. And one of my favorite stories here recently in this findable category, I was with a Swiss bank, a private Swiss bank in Zurich a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago now, and they were sitting there with the compliance team explaining their social media policy, which is no one's allowed to use social. It was very protective, private. We don't want anyone representing the organization on social. And for some reason, they'd invited a salesperson from the firm to the meeting. And the salesperson quietly raises their hand and says, I just want to walk you through a hypothetical scenario that may or may not have happened to me recently. And he's like, I have a LinkedIn profile that I say I work for our company, and I know you tell me not to do that. So I've already broken rule 1, which is I've created a presence and represent myself. A few weeks ago, I had someone I didn't know send me a LinkedIn email because this person had recently sold their business for over $1 billion. This is a true story. They were getting referred by a mutual connection. So this individual had recently sold their business. And when you make that kind of money, I guess you don't go to Google and say, what should I do with $1 billion? Right? I think you actually look to people you trust. And so what this individual did was they were on LinkedIn and they saw that a few of their trustworthy relationship network were connected to this private banker. And so they reached out to one of those contacts and said, I see you're connected to this guy, seems legitimate. Do you trust him? Should I reach out to him? Absolutely. I trust him with X amount of money that I never would have imagined I would. Don't hesitate to reach out. So we've got this private banker sitting there with a private message saying, I received this message, and the policy at this bank is I can't respond to it. What do I do with this kind of lead? What do I do if I wasn't present and didn't hear about this kind of lead? Right? The first step, again, isn't magic. It's organizing and taking those employees, your employed sales force, and helping them be present so that they can be discovered. Really, really simple. Second step is to grow your network. And this is what we call the social stage fright stage, if you will, where the agents don't know what to do on social media. And what we encourage them is be yourself. If you're passionate about football, talk about football. If you're passionate about cooking and health and fitness, talk about those things. Build a community of people that care about the things you care about, and that will lead you to the third and fourth step, which is to listen to your audience and speak up with the right content at the right time, so that when something relevant occurs, you're there as the trusted source to have a conversation. So again, 4 steps, and this is a playbook. People name these steps different things. We think ours are the best names, obviously. But take these, whether you start with just a handful of agents or you empower everyone to go this direction, these are practical but manual steps in a lot of ways. There's no way to say, I want to create 15,000 LinkedIn profiles for all of my sales team. Go. That takes time, just like every single transformation of a business, but it's something to build on. And I think the early success stories you'll hear of, I created a LinkedIn profile, I published my first piece of content, and I got connected with old colleagues and friends that forgot what I did for work, right? And it was timely. I posted content about life insurance, and a friend of a friend said, oh, that's really interesting. I'd love to chat with you more. These are not complex sales strategies. It's taking advantage of the big data, which is the network is there. Empower your people to go there. So those are my practical 4 steps. Just got a couple slides left. This is the boring sales pitch part of the presentation, so you can take your headsets off if you want. Hearsay is built on top of 4 products. So we see our vision to empower, skipping slides, to empower that salesperson, and to do that it requires multiple digital touch points. And so the 4 products we have in the market today are the social solution, designed to bring agents into the social world on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Zing, other networks. The second is a website solution. So our customers came to us and said, we see our agents creating their own websites. They're out of date, they're not mobile, they often have the logo of your company from 10 years ago on it, and we can't control it. How do you help us build uniform websites that are mobile, SEO optimized, that agents can change and keep updated? And so we built a platform to help you scale that. The third is a local email marketing tool. So again, to take that power of corporate email marketing, but localize it for the agent. We see that open rates from ExactTarget and Marketo, these big corporate campaigns, you probably know them, they're less than 1%. When you get an email from a big brand, you delete it, you archive it. When you get an email from a name you know, you probably give it a chance. You read it before you delete it. So how do you take that power of your content, but with the local touch that you pay a lot of money to have, pay a lot of commissions to keep them in business, how do you empower them with that content? So this is kind of our vision in terms of building on top of this compliance monitoring to protect you, give you the analytics and the big data to see how this is performing globally, and do it across multiple digital touch points. Last 2 slides are just a couple of key metrics across our business. Some of these are quotes from some of you in the room. We appreciate that. Organizations talking about the cross-sell that they're seeing. This isn't just about new business, right? It's about retaining your existing business, as we heard earlier this morning. If you can do that, you're saving a lot of money, right? If you're not constantly having to create new advertising campaigns, but you're better servicing and better supporting these channels. One of the things that fascinated me about this kind of retention number was the average agent talks to their customer once, maybe twice a year. And typically those are both negative interactions. The first touch point is a bill in the mail of you owe me money. And the second touch point is maybe a claim, right? So you're in a negative situation and you might be able to turn that into a positive. But if your 2 touch points with your customers are always at risk of being negative year over year, how do you find positive touch points through new channels? And that's why we encourage you to give them these channels to communicate about who they are and what they care about. And then my last slide, and Julian's here in the room. This is look at this guy. So Zurich's one of our early customers here in Spain. So we've got a video on our YouTube channel that you could go talk about. And I think we appreciate this quote because it's true and it's what we strive to be as a business. We're not just a sales tool, right? That's not put this sales tool in place and churn out new leads. It's really about empowering your salespeople to do what they do best, which is build and strengthen relationships and do that in the new world we live in. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for your time and for having me. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.